Medical school exams in Italy are so confusing. After being there for a year and a half, I still struggle to this day. This is kind of the crash course of medical school exams that I wish I had a year ago. They're confusing because there's new... We'll cover all of it, don't worry. Let's get into the terminology first. Let's start from the beginning. We have a calendar year from January to December that is split into semesters. The first semester of the academic year is the second half of the calendar year, so from August to December. And the second semester of your academic year would be the first half of the calendar year. In terms of classes that you're being taught, there's, at least in my university, 3.5-ish months of actual going to class, 2 weeks of self-study, and then you have an exam session. An exam session is the period after a semester during which you can take exams, during which exams are available, and it's typically made up of 2 months. And within that exam session, you have different appellos. An appello is usually a term referred to within the session, and it's the amount of time that you can take an exam for one specific subject. Usually there's 2 appellos per session, 1 per month. If this is confusing, yeah, it is. It really is, but let's dive a bit deeper into it and it will become clearer, I promise. First of all, each semester is followed by a session. The winter session follows semester 1 in January and February, and you would have the summer session in June, July. The third exam session of the year precedes every semester 1 after first year. So it takes place in September and you start classes in October. So you have 2 semesters, 3 sessions. How many appellos do you have? There's usually 1 appello a month. So that's 5 appellos for your first semester subjects, only 3 appellos for your second semester subjects. However, per calendar year, from January to January, you will have 5 appellos for every exam, unless of course you need to pass certain exams to go, for example, from second year to third year, which is something that my school does that I'm going to talk about later. So what's the maximum amount of times you can do an exam? The maximum amount of times, for example, a semester 1 subject from year 1, you could do it 5 times in the first year and then 5 times in the second year without having to repeat second year, because a lot of the times you can't go into third year if you still have to do some exams from first or second year. So that's why you could do a maximum, I think, of 10 times without repeating. So as I'm writing this down and saying it out loud, I realize that this is confusing. So let me use my timeline of medical school exams as an example, how I passed, how I failed, etc. It'll allow me to illustrate the exception that is the first semester of med school versus everything else. First semester of med school. It's an exception, firstly, because you start class in September with a month of prerequisites like maths, physics, and then your first day of official medical school subjects is October 1st. Humanitas University, the first semester of med school, you have 2 subjects. You have embryology, which I'm going to refer to as BB because they call it building bodies, and you have a tripartite combination of physics, inorganic chemistry, and organic chemistry, which they call principles of living matter, or PLM, which is what I'm going to call it. And so from second year onwards, regardless of how many subjects you have, you leave for Christmas break around the 20th of December, come back around the first week of January, directly into the exam period, the winter session that stretches January and February, and your first day of class of second semester is around March 1st. That's not the case for the first semester of medical school, because you leave for Christmas break, but then you come back to school for around 2 more weeks of class, and your winter session is only in the month of February. And they split February down the middle-ish, and you have 2 appellos for BB and PLM the first 15 days, and 2 appellos for BB, PLM the second half of February, the second 14 days. In my case, I passed PLM in the first appello and also BB in the first appello, which meant then that I could leave for the second half of the session, the second half of February. I could do whatever I wanted, and I just had to be back on the 1st of March. Second semester of med school, you have 3 subjects. You have anatomy, known as BA, cell biology, known as CMP, and cell physiology and biochemistry, known as CFC. So 3 exams. So So you have 3 apelos in June and 3 apelos in July, and you can choose these however you want. I'm going to talk about how to do that later in the video. But personally, what I did was I took all 3 of the first apelos and only passed CMP. In July, I decided I was going to do both again, and I passed CFC, and I still had to do BA. I then made the interesting choice of not taking the fall session for BA, but instead pushing it into next year's winter session, which is something you can do. You can decide to not take an exam, that you want more time to study, or simply that you don't want to take it. In my case, the reason was that I wanted more summer. It was a mistake because you should never put off something that you can do now, but also because the school kind of decided to get funky and they took an apelo from the winter session for BA and put it in the fall session. So we still had the overall same number of apelos. However, they were distributed differently. And so I thought I would have 2 chances in the winter session, but I only had 1 now because I skipped 2 apelos that they had, like the extra apelo that had appeared in the autumn session. And so we start second year, semester 1. We have 3 subjects: body at work, which is physiology, anatomy, and a bunch of other things. MMCB, which is basically genetics, and then MOD, which is mechanisms of disease, which is like immunity and microbes and stuff. And so we have in the winter session 3 new subjects plus my exam that I had to do from before, which was BA. As I hinted at before, a lot of exams serve as prerequisites for other exams. So BA was blocking me from taking both BA and MOD. So BA was my first priority, and I decided to do that as soon as I could. I took the only apelo of BA and then took the first apelo for BA without actually studying for it and failed it. And I'll explain why I did that at the end of the video. But then I also took the first apelos for MOD and for MNM or MMCB and passed both. So the only exam I had to do in its second apelo was now BA, which I studied for, failed. And that kind of brings us up to the present day, where this upcoming second semester of second year, I have to do BA 1, BA 2, and MOD 2. So 3 exams. I have the winter session, which is June, July, and also, if worst comes to worst, the autumn, the fall session, which hopefully it won't. The plan is to do in the first apelo BA 1 and BA 2, and then have July, or the second apelo, work as like a backup plan and do MOD 2 as well as any straggling BAs that are left behind. So that's the plan, and hopefully that's a bit clearer now. Like all this is giving you like a better picture of how it works. And I know it's complicated, so you can leave a comment, ask me questions, and I will answer. But now let me talk about the strategies and the advice that I've heard and that I've implemented and what I think works best. So one of the good things about having such a complicated system with multiple sessions and apelos and exams and blah 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 is that the Italians also allow you to reject grades, which means that basically if I get a grade below average or below what I think I should be getting at a certain exam, I can say, actually, I don't want that grade. And they just throw it in the bin and I have to redo the exam, but it allows me to score way higher and there's no consequences to doing this. This allows you to do something that teachers don't like, but I don't know why. It allows you to treat exams like they're practice sessions, the practice test. Then either fail it without consequences because you can just do it next apelo, or get like a really low score and reject it because you know you can do way better next apelo as well. But it's important to know when to accept and when to reject a grade. The common knowledge I've heard from most upper year students is that just don't refuse grades the first 2 years of med school. The first 2 years of med school are kind of all about surviving and just staying afloat and staying there. And once you hit third year, fourth year, then you can start refusing grades and trying to like make your average go up and score higher, maybe in specialties or subjects that align with the specialty you want to pursue in the future. I think never refuse a grade is a bit harsh. I think there's 2 scenarios where you should or could refuse a grade. The first one is if you need to keep a high average, for example, the scholarship. If I wanted to keep the scholarship, I needed 27 or 90%. So I would have had to refuse a bunch of scores. But that leads to the second point, which is only refuse a grade if you know you can score way higher than you already scored. Something else to consider when you have this many amount of opportunities to take an exam is when to do an exam and how to choose which exams to do. I've found that my personal limit on how many exams I can study for at the same time is 2, maximum 3. I can't study for more than 3 exams at a time. 3 is actually pushing it already. However, I do think that you should take every single appello you can. So looking at my first semester, second year, I had 4 exams to do, 4 appellos. I studied for 3 of them, but took 4 exams, failed this one, which was BA, took it second appello, then I failed it too, which wasn't too hot. But the point is simply that just take all the appellos just to get a feel for how you're doing, just to see where you are, like a benchmark. You can always refuse a grade if you pass and get a bad mark, but a lot of times you just won't pass and you can just do it later. It's fine. You should go watch this video to see what a day in the life during the exam season looks like. It gets really hectic, but it's I think a really good video, and you should subscribe.